tall and tan and young and lovely.
In the golden age of Hollywood, the screen was larger than life. Heroes looked towering, villains loomed menacingly, and lovers swept audiences off their feet with effortless grace. But behind the dazzling lights and iconic frames, there was a carefully guarded secret. Many of these legendary stars weren't as tall as fans believed. Studios knew that in an era when image was everything, height mattered. Apple boxes, hidden trenches, camera angles, even contracts about co-stars' footwear. Hollywood invented endless tricks to add inches where nature had not. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 11 classic Golden Age legends, who were surprisingly short, stars who proved that charisma, talent, and presence mattered far more than height ever could. And trust me, by the end you'll never look at some of Hollywood's most iconic kisses, standoffs, and romances the same way again. Alan Ladd, the tough guy on a box. Alan Ladd was the original Hollywood tough guy, steely-eyed, cool, and unforgettable in films like Shane and This Gun for Hire. But here's the twist. The man who made villains tremble stood just. Paramount knew height could make or break a star's image, so they became masters of illusion. Ladd was constantly filmed with co-stars who were shorter, most famously the petite Veronica Lake at just 4 feet. But with taller actors, directors had to get creative. Entire trenches were dug so that Ladd could appear eye to eye with rivals in Western showdowns. His co-stars joked about the Ladd box, a hidden platform he stood on in scene after scene. But here's the truth, audiences never noticed. Why? Because Ladd's greatest weapon wasn't height, it was presence. His stillness, his piercing gaze, and his quiet delivery radiated intensity that even the tallest actors couldn't match. Fans left theaters remembering his power, not his inches. James Cagney, the compact powerhouse. When you think of James Cagney, you think of explosions, not the kind with dynamite, but the kind that came from his volcanic performances. In The Public Enemy and White Heat, Cagney commanded the screen with such ferocity that audiences assumed he must be a towering figure. In reality, he was just. Warner Brothers knew that leading men couldn't look small, so they carefully staged scenes to keep Cagney in control. He was often filmed storming down staircases, shot from below to exaggerate his power, or paired with supporting actors of similar height. Posters and press kits even stretched the truth, listing him as 5'9" to feed the illusion. But what made Cagney larger than life wasn't tricks, it was energy. He moved like a coiled spring ready to snap, delivering lines with lightning speed and fists that looked like they could knock down a wall. Audiences never noticed his size because his sheer force of personality made him fill every frame. Cagney proved that an actor's presence could be 4 inches taller than his body. 3. Edward G. Robinson, Little Caesar with a giant shadow. Edward G. Robinson, best remembered for Little Caesar and Double Indemnity, stood at just 5 but on screen he seemed enormous, thanks to a voice and stare that could freeze the blood of even the tallest co-stars. Robinson didn't rely on height illusions as much as his contemporary. Instead, he leaned into his craft. His clipped, deliberate delivery and intense eyes made him one of cinema's most intimidating gangsters. When Robinson barked orders, you didn't measure his inches, you measured his authority. Still, studios worked to keep the illusion alive. Camera angles often placed Robinson in the center, making him look dominant. Sets were designed to let him loom over others, even if the ground had been discreetly raised. His legacy proved that menace didn't require physical size, just unshakable confidence. Mickey Rooney, Hollywood's biggest little star, standing at only 5'2", Mickey Rooney was one of the shortest leading men in Hollywood history. Yet in the 1930s and 40s he was MGM's biggest box office draw. His role as Andy Hardy allowed him to convincingly play teenagers well into his 20s, turning his small size into an asset rather than a liability. Rooney's charisma was boundless. Paired with Judy Garland in musicals, his energy and humor made him a fan favorite. As he aged, directors leaned on tricks, platform shoes, raised sets, and careful framing, but Rooney himself often laughed at the difference. In National Velvet, opposite Elizabeth Taylor, His smaller stature added to his charm. His career is living proof that when you overflow with talent, audiences don't care how tall you are. Humphrey Bogart, the not-so-tall dark stranger. Humphrey Bogart, immortalized in Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon, was listed at 5'10" in studio press, but in reality he was closer to 5. When paired with Ingrid Bergman, 5'9" in Casablanca, directors had to pull every trick in the book. Bogart often stood on steps while Bergman sat, creating the illusion that he loomed over. The crew even carried around his infamous bogey box, a portable platform he stood on during romantic close-ups. Yet here's the secret: audiences didn't care. They weren't measuring his height. They were captivated by his gravelly voice, sharp suits, and world-weary eyes. Bogart's presence wasn't in his inches, it was in his aura. 6. George Raft, the gangster who didn't need height. At 5'7", George Raft wasn't tiny, but in an era of towering co-stars he was considered small. Best known for Scarface, 1932, and Each Dawn I Die, 1939, Raft built his reputation playing cold, dangerous gangsters. His secret wasn't apple boxes or elevated shoes, it was stillness. Raft knew that motion could reveal size, so he often played his scenes standing perfectly still, arms folded, eyes locked. Critics said his frozen calm was scarier than a fistfight. His compact frame made his menace believable, proving you didn't have to be tall to be terrifying. 7. Sal Mineo, the compact rebel. Sal Mineo burst into fame opposite James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, 1955. At just 5'6", his small stature perfectly fit the role of a vulnerable teenager, seeking protection. His performance earned him an Oscar nomination. But as he grew older, Mineo's height worked against him. Casting directors struggled to place him in mature leading man roles. Tricks like elevated shoes and low camera angles helped in films like Crime in the Streets. But Hollywood's obsession with height unfairly limited his career. Still, Mineo's performances carried such emotional sensitivity that directors often said, "He has more talent in his small frame than actors twice his size." His story is a bittersweet reminder of how Hollywood's illusions could both build and break stars. 8. Sammy Davis Jr. Larger-than-life talent. At 5'3", Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the shortest stars in Hollywood. Yet his talent towered over almost everyone else. As part of the Rat Pack with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, Davis captivated audiences with his singing, dancing, acting, and comedic timing. On film sets, he used platform shoes and camera tricks, but Davis often joked about his height. On stage, he'd quip, "I may be looking up at you physically, but musically you're looking up at me." His energy was so powerful that his stature became irrelevant. He was a giant in every way that mattered. 9. Burgess Meredith, the Mighty Mite. Burgess Meredith, remembered as the Penguin in TV's Batman and as Rocky's fiery trainer Mickey, stood at just 5. In Hollywood, he never tried to hide his size. In fact, it often enhanced his roles. As Mickey in Rocky 1976, his small frame emphasized the underdog theme, making him the perfect counterpoint to Sylvester Stallone's towering box. Earlier in his career, studios sometimes gave him lifts or shot him from low angles. But by the 70s, Meredith had embraced his stature. His booming voice and fiery delivery proved that even the smallest man in the room could dominate it. Frank Sinatra, the voice that transcended inches. Frank Sinatra, Old Blue Eyes himself, stood around 5'7", but when he sang, no one thought about height. His charisma made him feel like the tallest man in every room. On screen, Sinatra occasionally used lifts and careful blocking in musicals like Pal Joey, but he rarely seemed insecure. When photographed beside taller women like Mia Farrow, he carried himself with so much confidence that the contrast became part of his charm. As one director put it, when Frank walked into a room, he was already the tallest man there. 11. Dustin Hoffman, a new era of small but mighty. Though slightly outside the strict Golden Age timeline, Dustin Hoffman carried the tradition forward. At 5'6", he He broke through in The Graduate, 1967, his smaller stature amplifying the awkward insecurity of his character. Unlike earlier stars, Hoffman didn't try to hide his height. Instead, he leaned into it. His roles in Midnight Cowboy, Kramer vs. Kramer, and Tootsie turned his stature into an advantage, reinforcing his image as the underdog who triumphs. Hoffman proved that by the late 60s, Hollywood was finally learning that greatness didn't come with an extra few inches. Hollywood's height illusion, the tricks behind the curtain. To keep audiences believing, Hollywood invented a toolkit of illusions. Apple boxes and lad boxes, wooden crates stars stood on during close-up. Trench tricks. In westerns, taller co-stars were literally made to stand in dugout trenches. Platform shoes, special lifts hidden in shoes gave actors an instant 2-3 inches. Camera angles, low shots made actors look taller and more imposing. Casting pairings, stars were often paired with shorter co-stars to preserve illusions. These tricks became so common they were industry slang and audiences never knew. Hollywood's golden age was about image. Height, like beauty, was another illusion carefully staged for audience. But as these 11 stars proved, true greatness isn't measured in inches. It's measured in presence, charisma, and the ability to make millions believe. Alan Ladd's stare, Cagney's fire, Robinson's menace, Rooney's humor, Bogart's cool, Davis's energy, Sinatra's voice, none of it came from height. It came from something taller, talent. As James Cagney once said, "It's not how tall you stand, it's how tall you stand in people's hearts." And these legends, they'll always stand tallest in cinema history. Which star's secret height shocked you the most? Bogart's bogey box, Alan Ladd's trenches, or Mickey Rooney's boyish 5'2"? Drop your pick in the comment. And if you want more hidden Hollywood history, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because next time we're uncovering the Golden Age icon, whose backstage temper was so terrifying, studios installed panic buttons on